What if the strongest warrior in the galaxy met the only human who refused to fight her? When a feared alien warlord challenges a captured soldier to a duel to the death, his unexpected act of mercy shakes the foundations of an empire built on conquest. This isn't just a battle. It's a moment that could change the future of two worlds forever. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show your support with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. The stars outside the cruiser. Stellar whispers shimmered like scattered fireflies across the dark velvet of space. Peace was the mission. At least, that's what tactician Darian Voss had been told when he was assigned to protect the ambassadorial team headed for negotiations with the Kailari. The Kailari were not known for diplomacy. They were known for fire, steel, and a history written in conquest. Still, Earth's leaders believed a truce could be reached, and Darian, 20 years a soldier, had learned to obey orders, even if he didn't believe in the dream behind them. The attack came without warning. One moment Stellar Whisper was gliding peacefully through the Red Halo Nebula. The next, a blast of blue plasma ripped through its hull. The ship shuddered violently. Alarms howling across every corridor. Gravity flickered. Sparks fell like fire rain from damaged circuits above. Darian barely kept his footing as he reached for the nearest handhold. Bridge to defense units, we've been hit. Shields are down. Multiple enemy ships approaching. Fast. The voice through the comm was cracked with fear. Darian slammed his fist against the emergency panel. Seal the diplomatic bay. Protect Ambassador Morel and her team at all costs. A young lieutenant ran up, face pale, eyes wide. Sir, we're surrounded. They're not just attacking, they knew exactly where to hit us. It's like they planned every move. That was the part that didn't make sense. The Kailari were brutal. Yes, but this attack was too precise. Too perfect. Darian's gut twisted. Someone had leaked their route, their security protocols, maybe even the ambassador's itinerary. Get the ambassador to the escape pods now, he said firmly. But sir, no arguments. Darian's voice was low but full of steel. I'll hold them off. You get them out. The lieutenant hesitated, then nodded, bolting down the corridor. The ship groaned like a wounded animal. Another blast tore through the lower decks. Darian moved quickly, ducking into a weapons locker and grabbing a pulse rifle. It was heavier than he remembered. Or maybe he was just tired. He slammed in a new power cell and tested the sight. It hummed to life. Good. He still had a few tricks left. A sharp noise echoed through the corridor ahead. Metal shrieking, air escaping. The Kailari were breaching the hull. Darian sprinted toward the forward defense station, planting his back against the wall just as the outer panel of the ship peeled open like fruit under a blade. The vacuum hissed, and then, suddenly, they were inside. The first Kailari warrior stepped through, massive and silent. 7 feet tall, built like stone. His silver skin was covered in jagged scars. His eyes glowed faintly, and he carried a weapon that pulsed like it was alive. Behind him, more Kailari poured in. You are alone, the lead warrior said, his voice deep and calm. Why? Because someone has to be, Darian replied. Then he opened fire. The first few shots struck center mass, but they didn't slow. The Kailari, their armor absorbed the impact like water rolling off rock. Darian ducked left, rolled under a fallen beam, and fired again, this time targeting joints, weak spots, movement patterns. He didn't miss, but it wasn't enough. There were too many of them, and they were too well prepared. A blast slammed into his shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. His rifle skittered away, out of reach. He fought with everything he had. A stolen blade, his fists, his boots. He didn't care. He just had to keep them distracted long enough for the ambassador to escape. But they were here for him. A sudden jolt of electricity surged through his body as something sharp embedded into his back. He hit the floor, muscles locking up. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was a pair of bright violet eyes staring down at him. Not a soldier, not a grunt. Someone higher, someone important. When he woke, he was in a cell of glowing bars and smooth black metal. His wrists were bound with cuffs that hummed softly with energy. Outside his cell, the hallway was silent. Cold. Still. He sat up slowly, ignoring the pain in his ribs. His mind was already working, cataloging what he remembered, the number of attackers, their formation, the way they avoided hitting certain parts of the ship. They hadn't wanted to destroy it. They'd wanted him alive. Why? Footsteps echoed, down the hallway, slow and deliberate. A figure appeared, tall and imposing, with silver-blue armor that reflected the low light like glass. Her face was angular and scarred, her expression unreadable. "You're the one they call Darian Voss," she said. Her voice was calm, smooth as ice. He looked up at her, still breathing hard. "That's what they tell me. I am Kyvera, Supreme Warlord of the Kailari. And you are not dead because I want to understand why your people keep offering peace, even as they prepare for war." Darian gave her a tired smile. "Maybe we just don't like giving up." Kyvera tilted her head, studying him. "You will fight me. Tomorrow. In the circle of flames." He blinked. "And if I refuse? You will die slowly." Darian leaned his head back against the wall, exhaled through his nose, and gave a short laugh. "Of course." Kyvera turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the silence. He was alone again, staring at the ceiling of his cell. Around him, the Kailari stronghold hummed quietly with power. Outside, the red halo pulsed against the stars, bleeding light across the galaxy. Tomorrow, he would face the Queen of War herself, alone, outmatched. And yet, for the first time since the attack, Darian didn't feel afraid. He felt something else. Ready. The cold glow of the Kailari prison never changed. Whether it was day or night, it always looked the same. Sterile, silent, and humming with hidden danger. Darian Voss sat on the smooth black floor of his cell, his back against the wall, watching the arena below through the glowing energy bars. The arena was huge, shaped like a circle carved into the heart of a mountain. It looked ancient and sacred, the stone floor covered in strange markings and old dark stains that told stories he didn't want to hear. 3 days had passed since his capture. He'd barely spoken, and no one had said much to him either. Kailari. Guards passed now and then, but most ignored him like he was just another problem that didn't need solving. He spent the time observing, tracking guard patterns, watching the routines, counting how often supplies came through the corridor. His soldier's mind never stopped working, even in captivity. On the 4th day, someone different appeared outside his cell. This one was smaller than the others, maybe just a bit taller than a human, with more delicate features and curious eyes. The Kailari's armor was simpler too, decorated with fine symbols etched into the chest plate. The alien studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You are the human called Darian," she said, her voice softer than the others he'd heard. "And you are?" he replied, keeping his tone even. "I'm Nira. I maintain the Queen's technology systems. I wanted to see the man who speaks strangely to our warlord." Darian raised an eyebrow. "Strangely? I only told her the truth." "That's what makes it strange," Nira said with a flicker of confusion across her face. "Most prisoners beg, boast, or curse. You spoke of mercy." Darian gave a tired shrug. "Maybe because I've seen enough war to know how it ends. It's never clean, and nobody ever really wins." Nira watched him a moment longer, then walked away, leaving behind the soft sound of her footsteps and a deeper silence than before. Darian couldn't be sure, but it felt like the quiet around him had shifted. Later that night, the silence broke again, but this time it was different. The guards stood straighter. They stepped aside. Someone important was coming. Kyvera appeared like a storm in human form, tall, sharp, and composed. Her armor looked like it was part of her body, dark silver with red undertones that flickered as she moved. Her expression was calm but intense, and her amber eyes studied him like he was both a threat and a puzzle. "You have caused a stir among my people," she said, standing outside the energy bars. "All I've done is talk," Darian said. "That is what concerns them. You speak of ideas they do not understand." Ideas that weaken the foundation of what we've built. He stood slowly, keeping his hands at his sides. Or maybe they're ideas that give you something more to build on. Kavira didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked slowly along the outside of the cell, her eyes never leaving him. You are not like other soldiers I've met. You study instead of lash out. You ask questions rather than shout threats. I've had years to learn what doesn't work, Darian said. And I've seen enough death to know it's not always the answer. She stopped in front of him, the energy bars casting pale light across her face. Our ancient texts speak of enemies who destroyed entire empires not with weapons but with strange kindness. Some believe those are just myths meant to frighten children. Others wonder if they're warnings we've ignored. Maybe they're both, Darian replied quietly. Stories can teach us, but only if we're willing to listen. Kavira stared at him, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Tomorrow, we enter the arena. You will face me in ritual combat. It is sacred to my people. I figured, he said. And if I win? You won't, she said calmly. But that's not the point. The trial is not about victory. It's about truth. It will show my people what kind of leader I am, and what kind of enemy you are. He met her gaze. Maybe I'm not your enemy. For the first time, her expression shifted slightly, just a flicker of something uncertain. She turned and walked away, her voice low as she said, We'll see. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Darian went through the motions of old martial, drills, stretching, moving through stances, training muscle memory. He had no illusions about tomorrow. Kavira was powerful, trained, and revered. He wouldn't beat her with strength. He'd have to think differently, act differently. As the hours passed, his thoughts drifted to Earth, to the missions he'd survived, to the soldiers he'd lost, and to the strange feeling that something bigger was happening here, something that went beyond a single battle, maybe even beyond this war. Kavira returned just before dawn, standing in front of his cell once more. Her voice was softer this time. Do you feel fear? I feel everything, Darian answered. But I don't let it control me. She nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully. Our people fear weakness. They think it leads to ruin. But now I wonder, what if refusing to strike is not weakness but strength of another kind? He stepped closer to the bars. Maybe strength isn't just about what you can destroy. Maybe it's about what you choose to protect. Their eyes locked through the glowing barrier. No weapons, no armor. Just a human and a queen caught between duty and doubt. As the first light of the Kailari system touched the edges of the arena, below, Darian whispered, Whatever happens tomorrow, I hope you remember this moment. Kavira didn't reply, but her silence carried weight. Then, without another word, she turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Darian alone again, but this time, not entirely without hope. The twin suns of the Kailari system rose slowly over the arena, casting long, golden shadows across the stone. The heat was already thick, baking the sand until it shimmered like water. Thousands of Kailari filled the Colosseum, their silver and bronze armor glowing under the harsh light. They had come from across the stars to witness something never seen before, a human standing against their undefeated warlord in the trial of suns. Darian Voss stood at the edge of the combat circle, stripped of all but the simplest protection. A light chestplate, leather bracers and boots. No helmet, no high-tech weapons. Just a curved Kailari blade he didn't quite trust, and a dry mouth he couldn't shake. He had faced many battles in his life, but this one was different. This one was about more than survival. It was about what his people stood for, and maybe what hers could become. Across the circle, Kavira stepped forward, moving like a shadow given life. Her armor was more ceremonial than practical. Minimal plates, bare arms, long leather straps that twisted with each motion. Her crimson hair had been tied back and her expression was calm, focused. But Darian saw something in her eyes. Not anger, not hatred. Something else. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. The signal horn sounded, a deep, mournful note that rolled across the arena, like thunder. The crowd silenced in an instant. Kavira moved first. She didn't charge. She flowed. Her blade sliced through the air, fast and precise, aimed at his side. Darian twisted away, barely dodging. The wind from her strike grazed his ribs. She was fast, so fast. He couldn't beat her strength and he knew it, but he didn't need to. He countered with a feint, stepping into her space just long enough to draw her in. She struck again, this time a vertical slash that would have split him in half. He dropped to one knee, rolled sideways and slashed upward, not to kill, but to mark. His blade cut across her side, a shallow line that broke the skin but didn't slow her. Kavira stepped back, touched the blood trickling from her ribs and looked at it like it was the first time she'd seen her own vulnerability. The crowd murmured. It was the first blood she'd ever spilled in ritual combat. "You're not here to win," she said between breaths. "You're here to prove something." "I'm here to give you a choice," Darian replied, circling with her. "And to survive if I can." Their blades met again. Clash, slide, deflect. Kavira attacked with the grace of a dancer and the force of a storm. Darian fought defensively, parrying when he could, dodging when he couldn't. Every movement she made was meant to dominate. Every move he made was meant to endure. She swept his legs and he hit the ground hard, sand flying around him. She raised her weapon to strike. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his blade. And she paused. The arena held its breath. "You're not afraid," she whispered, low enough that only he could hear. "I am," he replied. "But fear doesn't make my choices." She stepped back, lowering her blade for a moment. Confusion flickered in her amber eyes. The audience was growing restless. Some were shouting, others were silent. Priests on the upper tier were frantically consulting scrolls, pointing at him, pointing at her. Darian stood again, breathing hard. Sweat ran down his face and back. His arms ached, his legs burned, and still he did not raise his weapon. A priest stepped forward onto the central platform. He held a scroll that shook slightly in his hands. His voice echoed through the arena, sharp and urgent. "The prophecy," he declared in the Kalari tongue. "The one who refuses to strike will reveal the future. The one who chooses mercy will light the path." Kavira's head turned slowly toward the platform. She said nothing. Her grip on the weapon tightened, then loosened. "You could have killed me," she said quietly to Darian. "I still could," he answered. And then gently, he let his blade drop to the sand. The crowd erupted, not in celebration, in disbelief. Warriors shouted. Commanders stood from their seats. Chaos rippled through the arena like a quake. But Kavira didn't move. She just stared at him. "You surrendered," she said, almost like a question. "No," he said. "I chose not to kill you." Her blade lowered. She let it fall beside. In that moment something shifted. Inside her, inside the Colosseum, maybe inside the Empire itself. "You fight with a strength we've never understood," she said. "Not with the blade, with your choice." "Maybe your people have only seen one kind of strength," Darian said. "And maybe now they'll see another." Kavira turned to the crowd. She raised her voice above the noise, calm and clear. "This is not defeat," she said. "This is a beginning." As the suns burned higher and the crowd tried to understand what they had just seen, Darian and Kavira stood together at the center of the Trial of Suns. No longer just opponents. Something new had begun. The fires of the arena had long gone cold, but the memory of what happened there still burned through the halls of the Kalari stronghold. Word of Darian Voss's decision to spare warlord Kavira spread across the empire like wildfire. Some called it weakness, others a miracle. What no one could deny was that something had changed. For the first time in generations, a trial had ended not in blood but in mercy, and that shook the very foundation of Kalari culture. Inside the royal command chamber, Kavira stood alone, facing the wide viewport that looked out over her fleet. Hundreds of warships hovered in formation beyond the glass, each one capable of destroying a city in seconds. They were beautiful in their own way, sleek and deadly, symbols of an empire built on fear. But now Kevira saw them differently. Not as tools of glory, but as burdens. Heavy, dangerous things that could no longer define the future she wanted. Behind her, Darian entered quietly. His wounds from the trial had healed, though a few still ached when he moved too fast. He said nothing at first, letting the silence settle. When Kevira finally turned, he saw the weariness in her eyes. Not physical, but the kind that came from questioning everything she'd ever known. "They want your decision," he said softly. "The generals, the council, the priests, everyone's waiting." "I know," she replied, her voice low. "And every path feels like a battlefield." Darian stepped closer. "They're afraid, and they don't understand. But that's not new, is it? Change always scares people. The real question is, what are you afraid of?" Kevira gave him a long look. "That mercy will be seen as surrender. That they'll think I've lost my edge." "Maybe," Darian said. "Or maybe they'll realize that real strength is choosing peace when war is easier." A small smile touched her lips. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," he admitted. "But it is worth trying." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars move slowly beyond the glass. Then the chamber's comm unit lit up with a message from General Cernak, one of the most powerful voices in the fleet. He was demanding an answer. Would Kevira continue the old ways, or would she embrace something new? "I have to speak to them," she said finally, squaring her shoulders. "I'll be by your side," Darian told her. Later that day, Kevira stood on the high platform in the central council hall. The space was packed with Kalari leaders from across the empire, generals in polished armor, scholars with ancient scrolls, engineers, pilots, and warriors of every kind. Darian stood beside her, quiet but visible. That, in itself, was a statement. "People," Kevira began, her voice carrying through the chamber with calm authority, "I have stood on 1,000 battlefields. I have brought empires to their knees. I have led you with strength and certainty. And yet, one human, in one moment, showed me a different kind of strength." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Had the power to strike me down, but he chose not to. He made a choice that changed how I see the world. He made me question everything I thought was true. That is not weakness. That is vision." A general stepped forward, his face tense. "We have conquered half the galaxy with fire and steel. If we stop now, we risk losing everything." Kevira nodded. "And what have we truly gained? More enemies, more bloodshed, a legacy of fear. I am not asking you to abandon your strength, I am asking you to use it differently," another voice called out. "What would we become? Protectors? Diplomats?" "Maybe," she answered. "Maybe we become something better, stronger, not because we can destroy, but because we choose not to." The room went silent. Then a young commander stepped forward, barely out of her training years. She raised her fist in salute. "I will follow this path," she said, "not because I understand it, but because I believe in your courage to walk it." More voices followed. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Over the following weeks, changes began to ripple through Kalari society. Some fleets were reassigned to protect trade routes instead of raiding them. Negotiations began with human diplomats. True negotiations this time. Factories that once made weapons started to build medical ships and transport vessels. There was resistance, of course. Not everyone believed. But enough did to start something real. Darian and Kevira grew closer. Their connection was no longer about survival or strategy. It was about shared hope. Two warriors who had seen the worst of their worlds, and now dared to dream of something better. One day, as they stood in the hangar of the rebuilt Stellar Whisper, now a symbol of peace rather than diplomacy gone wrong, Kevira turned to him. "Will you leave?" she asked. "No," Darian said. "Not yet. There's still work to do." She nodded. "Then stay. With me. Not just as an advisor. as something more. He took her hand, and for the first time since the war began, he smiled without hesitation. Always. And as the ship's engines hummed to life, ready to carry a joint Kalari human crew across the stars, the future felt different. Not certain, not easy, but possible, and that was enough.